Welcome to Questionable Calls, where we analyze the implications of inactive NFL players every Sunday between 12:15 and 12:45 EST. I'm Mike Davis, and I'm joined by Matthew Schiff, who's been collaborating with me on the Q&A column at fftoday.com for years. Now that the probable tag has been eliminated from the injury report, it's more important than ever to know what questionable means, which is why we base our determinations in this program on the game day inactive report released an hour before kickoff each Sunday. That doesn't give us much time to get through this information, so let's jump to Matthew's thoughts on the Cardinals at the Bills. Matthew, the Cardinals favored by 4.5 against a Bills team in disarray. Over-unders 47 points, and I guess the most important headline for fantasy players is that Sammy Watkins is out. What's your take on this one?
Well, we'll finally see what the offense can do without a star player on the field this week. Look for, LaShawn McCoy to take a big load off of the offense. You're going to see a lot of little screen plays. You're going to see some running. And the only way that they're going to get anything in the way of a passing attack is to really do a big play-action pass, and they got to fake that run hard and pull that middle linebacker up. Once they do that, Robert Woods has a chance of being the outlet receiver here. It'll be an interesting stat day, not exactly the type of stat day that I'd want to go out and pick up Sammy Watkins' backup. So I'd really rely a little more on LaShawn McCoy and hope that they can soften up that defense and give them some room to run.
Yeah, it seems like it could be a pretty decent day for LaShawn McCoy as long as the game doesn't get out of hands. I mean, the Cardinals are certainly capable of putting up a lot of points, putting the game out of reach, and then forcing the Bills into a full-on passing attack. If that doesn't happen, I can see a big game for McCoy. If it does, whoa, go ahead.
If they get behind, if the Bills get behind early and the Cardinals can clamp down with their stellar defense, which has not been as good as it has been in the past, but they have the ability to do that today. They get up early, forget it. It's going to be a very long, long day in Buffalo.
Okay. I guess the big news out of Buffalo this week was the firing of offensive coordinator Greg Roman. The offense, Tyrod Taylor is the only thing that's been sort of promising about that team. The defense is in disarray. Obviously, Rex Ryan's brother is the defensive coordinator. It's difficult to fire your brother. But do you have a take on what's going on in Buffalo?
I've heard whispers of what's going on, but this was just a scapegoat thing at this point. Basically, the whole team is on notice that if they don't get it done, it's a cleaning house at the end of the year. And so that was the first step.
Okay, and I think it might be a cleaning house mid-year. I'm not sure Ryan makes it through to the end of the season as the head coach.
Very true. Very true. Very true.
Okay, I'm having some technical glitches on my end, Matthew, as I mentioned to you. If you could open up a window to check Twitter for the hashtag QCalls, that's the hashtag we use to take questions from listeners. It's hashtag QCALLS. If you want to hit either Matthew or me up with questions about your fantasy teams in this 1 o'clock slate. And that'll take us on to the Raiders, favored by 1.5 at the Titans. Under on this one is 46.5 points, so a decent amount of points considering that we got the Titans involved here. Why don't you give us your initial thoughts on this one, Matthew?
Well, you've got two players out that are really the heart and soul of the passing attack over the last year or two. Kendall Wright and Delaney Walker being out. You have Tajay Sharp. Tajay Sharp is how you pronounce his name?
That's how I pronounce it. I don't know.
Okay, well, if you take the two tight ends that are playing for Tennessee right now, the targets that they've had over the last two games are a total of 16 and 13 targets per game. Now with one person instead of spread across two, the numbers just go up. The more targets you have, if you have a player, that's the ideal scenario. Not to mention, this is a very, very sweet matchup for any tight end playing against the Raiders defense that has given up the fourth most yards to tight ends in the league. So that's one of the stats you should be aware of when you're plugging in a tight end and looking for a player who might be questionable in the day that he's supposed to play.
Right. That's why I think a lot of fantasy players are really disappointed for Delaney Walker to miss this one. But with Delaney Walker out, I think it's reasonable to expect DeMarco Murray to get a lot of outlet passes out of the backfield here, which is why I think maybe DeMarco Murray is a real play this week. Do you have a sense that DeMarco is the big running back in this game, or do we want to go with the other Murray, Latavius, for the Raiders?
I actually am thinking Latavius Murray may have a big day against the Titans. The Titans have tried to really control running backs over the last year or two, and the defense is getting better. But with the combination of Derek Carr and the ability of Amari Cooper to stretch that field, as well as Michael Crabtree finally playing up to what he was supposed to do in San Francisco, it's going to give the Tennessee Titans a fit. They play very much like Jacksonville, who they have big problems with.
Okay, so you can see a big day from even Crabtree, which means I guess you're feeling pretty good about Carr's performance in this game. I'm a little bit more excited about Marcus Mariota. I think the thing about the Titans offense is it has to do something today. The Raiders defense is not very good. The Titans are going to put up some points. They won't be put up by Walker. They won't be put up by Wright. Certainly Murray's going to do some of the damage, but I think a lot of the damage is going to have to be done by Marcus Mariota, and I think he could be a very sneaky QB start this week. What's your take on that?
The first week he came into the league, 4 touchdowns. Since then, I'm not saying pedestrian, I'm saying this might be his chance to do it again.
Okay. Maybe a bit of a surge here from Mariota. Matthew, can you please check your Twitter screen there to see if we've gotten any tweets to hashtag Q calls?
Hashtag Q calls.
While you're checking that out, I'll give us the rundown on the Browns at the Dolphins. Dolphins favored by 9.5 points in this one, a relatively low-scoring game, over-under of 42. But even with this low-scoring game, you got a line that's so big that still Vegas expects plenty of points for the Dolphins. What are your general thoughts on this matchup?
Well, I think it's a very telling sign that Ajayi is not in. He was not named the starter this week.
Okay.
The rookie drafted in the first round or the third round by a Miami Dolphins, Drake. I'm trying to do multiple things here. Sorry.
Right.
And we're having technical problems as well on this.
Sorry about that.
No, but I think it's Drake Benjamin is supposed to be behind center today, if I remember correctly. And no, not Drake Benjamin. But it's
Kenyon Drake, maybe?
Yeah, Kenyon Drake. Sorry. That's a senior moment. Kenyon Drake is this rookie who they really would like to see. He's going to get his chance to carry the rock a bunch of times in this game. And Ajayi is just not stepping out of the doghouse fast enough here. He's been benched. He was actually inactive, and he was healthy. And I see Tannehill has got to step up. Again, he just hasn't been doing it. I'm not sure why, whether it's him being through so many offensive coordinators and head coaches, or whether he just doesn't have the talent around him. And Devontae Parker, he's supposed to be stepping up here. This is a wide receiver that was taken last year in the first round of the draft. He was there for a little bit, but now has been lost in this offense.
Right. There have been mixed feelings on Parker through the preseason and even into the regular season. His stat line looked pretty good last week, but he wasn't much of a contributor until the second half of the game. That's not a clear signal that he's been worked into the offense. It may have been that the Dolphins were just trying stuff. So we've got Kenny Stills as the sort of chief competitor for the deep ball against Devontae Parker. Clearly, Jarvis Landry is our regular short pass receiver. I'd love to see Devontae Parker emerge. I mean, clearly he's got the youth on his side, and he seems to have the talent. But he hasn't clicked yet with the fish. Maybe he will this week. I certainly think he's worth watching. On the Browns side of the ball, you got to feel for this team. They lost Josh McCown, who came in to replace RG3, which means, as you pointed out in the Q&A column this week, Matthew, it means the Browns are starting their third quarterback this season in Week 3, their third starting quarterback. And if you go back to last season, it's their 5th starting quarterback in 5 weeks. That's just tough. And the other real disappointment is we had Corey Coleman come on real strong last week, and that looks like a bright light for the Browns. And then he's out this week. I mean, this team just can't catch a break. What are the Browns going to do today, Matthew? Anything?
If you're in a DraftKings and you want to get a low value, high output guy, Isaiah Crowell, man, I think this guy's going to step up and be explosive this week. They're going to try to move him wide. They're going to get him between the tackles. They're going to do everything they can to move this guy all over the field. Put him together with Pryor, and these guys might actually surprise you. At the youth movement in Cleveland, they're committed to this youth movement. The coaching staff is all in. They understand that they're going to lose some games. And unfortunately, they're going to lose some quarterbacks along the way. Their offensive line has been told, you have to do a better job protecting our quarterback. But I will say, Josh McCown got a huge kudo from his coach saying he's one of the toughest guys I ever seen. He went down in the first quarter with the injury and gutted it out the rest of the way. Don't count them out.
Yeah, it was really encouraging. I mean,
do not count this Cleveland Browns team out. Miami is not that good. They just aren't.
Okay, yeah, I think you pointed out that they're in the bottom third of the league, both offensively and defensively in almost every category. So it could be a stronger performance from the Browns than we're expecting, but with Kessler in at QB, it's hard to imagine. Of course, anything's possible. All right, that takes us to our next matchup, Ravens at the Jaguars. Ravens favored by 2.5 in this one with an over-under of 46 points. Ravens will be missing Kenneth Dixon and Buck Allen. This is the same scenario we've been facing week after week with the Raven running back platoon. Dixon and Allen are out. That means Justin Forsett and Terrence West become interesting, but of course Forsett and West split the carries and don't do much with the carries they get, so it's hard to get excited about any of them. If I had to pick a Ravens rusher, it would be Forsett this week. How about you, Matthew? Would you play him? Is he in your lineup? Can you imagine that being the case?
Can I imagine? I actually visualize it since I look at it on the screen. Unfortunately, I ended up taking Forsett, and I understand this, quagmire of running backs. I actually think of the 4 running backs on that offense, I think Buck Allen is the best pure running back of the 4 of them, with Terrence West being more like a scat back type running back. Forsett is proving that he was just a one-year wonder, unfortunately. And I have him in my roster. I have to plug him in because I've got Jamal Charles and Tom Rawls as well. And that's where I'm hurt. I'm hurt across the board because I have 2 guys injured and a guy who's underperforming. You're going to have to look to somebody else sometime during the season. And hopefully West gets his shot. As much as I'd like Forsett to play well, I think West has got an opportunity today to take advantage of his carries. Dennis Pitta returned last week in a vengeance with over 102 yards of receiving. They've got to get him back in the game. I think he's probably got the ability to be your number 1 tight end. And if you have Delaney Walker like I do, and I expected to play him, I'm plugging in Pitta as my backup.
Right, a lot of people excited about Dennis Pitta in the FF Today Expert Staff League. Pitta went for $125 fab dollars out of 1,000. So clearly there was a lot of interest in him. Let's flip it over to the Jaguars side of the ball and try to get a read on that running game. Through weeks 1 and 2, T.J. Eldon has not been very impressive, and Chris Ivory has been injured. This week, we may see some action from Ivory. It's not entirely clear. But even if Ivory is out, would you play Yeldon? Is he exciting enough to you as a running back?
Ivory is active, and they've listed him as the number 1 running back in front of Yeldon. So that's an interesting that's an interesting bit of information for all of those fantasy guys going, well, who's going to play? Yeldon has played well in the past few years. The past year or so, but with 21 opportunities, He put 39 yards up and only a touchdown in the first game against the Packers. That he had 7 more opportunities and he had 28 yards. But still, that's a 4-yard per carry average. You'd like to see it a little bit higher. If Ivory's healthy, you got to give him the rock and let him try to do that. But it's really the wide receivers, the twin towers between Robinson and Hearns, that really make this offense sing. And then on top of that, you got Julius Thomas, who's actually playing in this game. So that offense actually is more scary to me than the opposite side of the ball. And I would just lean on the Jaguars a little more offensively, but the Ravens defense can always turn it over and change the complexion of the game.
All right, our next game has the Packers favored by 7 at home against the Lions. Over-under on this one is 47 points. We've had some disappointing receivers on both teams this season. Golden Tate, before the Lions acquired Marvin Jones, people expected big things from Golden Tate. Then there was a reassessment after the Jones acquisition, and through the first 2 weeks of the season, Tate has been a disappointment in terms of his catches. Not necessarily in terms of his targets. He's drawing the attention of Matthew Stafford often enough, but things aren't working out for him, and I've heard some debates amongst analysts about whether that's more Tate's fault or just circumstances, and certainly there are some analysts who expect Tate to right the ship. Randall Cobb, now that Jordy Ferguson is back in the lineup at Green Bay, was expected to show flashes of what we saw back in 2014 when Ferguson and Cobb were the 1A and 1B receivers in Green Bay, but that hasn't been the case so far this season. Do you have on either one of these sort of unsung receivers?
Which ones are you considering the unsung? Golden Tate, or are you considering?
Yeah.
Or are you saying it's Randall Cobb? I mean, at this point, Randall Cobb is returning from injury. Jordy Nelson, there's supposed to be that great combination you have as well. It's not only a duo, but it's really a trio of Devontae Adams as well. He's pulling 7 targets per week, so he didn't do much with it last week. You look at this trio, what's going on in Green Bay? And a few years ago, a guy named Aaron Rodgers came out in week 4, and everybody was screaming what's going on with Green Bay at that time, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. So this is a team that it takes a little while to get started and get all the pieces working with this West Coast offense of theirs. I'm very, very surprised, however, with Detroit's ability to put up points. Regardless of what's going on with the wide receivers, you're looking at both of these wide receivers Marvin Jones is getting 10 to 11 targets per game, and Golden Tate is 2 or 3 less. Not a big difference. It's just the game plan. Matthew Stafford is actually maturing enough to take this team and be the leader of this team. Question is, this is a divisional game. You get trick plays, everything's up in the air. I don't play these survivor games on this one, but it's going to be an entertaining game to see who is actually taking it to the next level.
I think we lost Matthew there.
I'm here. I just stopped talking at that point.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I want to quickly hit on Amir Abdullah being out, and that presumably inflates the value of Theo Riddick, who's been off to a promising start this season, and we expect increased goal line work for Zach Zinner. But with that said, we need to move quickly to the Broncos at the Bengals. Bengals the home favorite here by just 4 points and an over-under of just 42.5 points. So not a lot of offense expected in this one. We're missing both the premier tight ends in this game, Virgil Green for the Broncos and Tyler Eifert for the Bengals. We had Gio Bernard sort of really picking up slack for Jeremy Hill, certainly last week, with a number of receptions. Do you have a read on the Bernard-Hill split in the rushing game this week, Matthew?
That one I don't have as good as a handle on as the fact that I think that A.J. Green is going to be really the big component of the offense today for the Bengals. And what you're going to look for is C.J. Anderson. He's going to be another workhorse. 4 touchdowns, 4 weeks. This guy is really starting to take on the essence of the Denver attack here. So those are the two plays I'd be looking for in the way of fantasy players to step up in this week. With the split between Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard is always game situational. That's the only issue with that.
Right. It does seem to be impossible to predict that one. You roll the dice and take your chances. The Bronco defense, one of the best in the league last year, and looking like it'll be a top defense again this year. Missing DeMarcus Ware, that fierce linebacker, this week, so we can expect less pressure on the Bengals in the absence of Ware, and maybe that opens things up both in the running game and the passing game for the Bengals. They could have a good game here. I'd certainly love to see another performance like the one we got from A.J. Green in Week 1. We can certainly hope for that. Moving on to the Vikings at the Panthers. We've got two really good defenses here in Minnesota and Carolina, so the over-under is a low 42. Panthers favored by 6.5 points, and I want to give listeners a quick rundown of the sort of similarities in what both teams are facing at the running back position. Both Adrian Peterson, starting running back for the Vikings, and Jonathan Stewart, starting running back for Carolina, are out. And in both cases, these premier running backs are backed up by not a clear understudy. Peterson has both Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata behind him. Stewart has both Fozzie Whitaker and Cameron Artis-Payne behind him. Stewart missed last week, and we had a lot out of Whitaker and nothing from Payne. But this week we heard from the Carolina staff that Whitaker's going to be more preserved for special teams, and we should expect to see a lot more of Artis-Payne. Do you think that was coach speak designed to sort of throw the Vikings off the track, or do you think they're going to follow through on that, Matthew? Do you consider Artis-Payne the vastly superior start to Whitaker?
I think the coaches don't know who they're going to play. That's the matter of fact. I think they're saying, we like both of them, we're going to see what's going to happen, and this is our way of couching our answer and keeping the other team on their toes. More importantly, my God, the guy, Kelvin Benjamin, he's in his third year. We talked about it last week, I believe. We said he's a head case, but you know what? The guy is starting to step up and play.
It's kind of amazing. You look at the physical specimen that Kelvin Benjamin is, and you look at the physical specimen that Cameron Newton is, and you just think, my goodness, how can a man that big throw to another man that big? How can they both be on the same team? It just doesn't seem fair. Certainly, there's all sorts of reason to expect big performance from Kelvin Benjamin. And I guess my answer on when it comes to trying to parse what's going to happen at running back for the Panthers is just don't forget that Newton's back there. And really the running game is more likely to run through Cam Newton than through either Whitaker or Artis-Payne, so I'm not sweating that one. As for the Viking running back situation, if I had to start one, I would start McKinnon. And I know there's a lot of people who would prefer Asiata because it looks like he's a lock for the goal line carries, and certainly that's a smart play. I think if you start Asiata, you're going to get a TD or two. I think that's fair. But McKinnon gets the work between the 20s, and he's a much better receiving back than was the case earlier in his career. He's proven his chops in that department. And so I think McKinnon could come up as a genuinely viable replacement. The sort of expert consensus on McKinnon is that he's the upside back, whereas the Asiata is the sort of guaranteed goal line carry back. Do you have any insights on that running situation, Matthew?
Yeah, I'll say a handful of words. Thunder and lightning, too. I've heard that before.
Right, thunder and lightning from the running game there, and then extra lightning from Stephon Diggs on the outside, the wide receiver who will not have any real competition for targets from Laquan Treadwell, who's missing the game. Of course, this could elevate Kyle Rudolph's role in the passing game, that very valuable Minnesota tight end. Okay, let's move on to the Redskins at the Giants. Giants favored by a field goal, divisional rival here, so you give the home team a field goal. And this one's going to be fun to talk about, but we don't have a lot of information beyond the fact that Rashad Jennings is out. Presumably, this elevates the value of Shane Vereen, who's already been quite active, especially as a receiving back for the Giants. But, of course, you've got that platoon with Orleans Darkwa, etc., in New York, and I suffered through this last year. It's always a guessing game as to whether to insert Jennings into the lineup or not. I'm therefore steering clear of it in just about all my leagues this year. Do you have a read on what we can expect from the Giant running game today, Matthew?
They're going to give Shane Vereen the rock as much as possible. They don't want to give Darkwa the ball as much, even though they have a lot of faith in the second-year runner out of Tulane. Shane Vereen is going to be a workhorse back. When he needs a rest or a changeup, they'll bring in Darkwa. However, everybody's been talking about Norman and OBJ. They're really, really quiet. They're going to go on the field. They're probably not even going to say anything to everybody. That's what some of the experts on ESPN are talking about. My guess is, however, what you're going to see more importantly is Sterling Shepard is going to have a big day for the Giants to win this game. Because the Redskins, while Cousins has not exactly played to his best, he does have weapons in Deshaun Jackson, who has had a history of burning this Giants team. Unfortunately, as being a Giants fan, I know exactly when and where I was every time he burned us either on a punt return or a deep touchdown. This guy can stretch the field. But you look at Jordan Reed, the big guy in the middle. He's going to take all the attention off of the outside and the middle guys, and they'll be able to run that post in right behind him if they want with another wide receiver. I think, in fact, if I'm looking at it correctly, they have, give me 1 second, Crowder, who's going to do that because he's been very active in weeks 1 and 2.
Right. The thing is, just think about all the receivers in this game. I mean, you do have Crowder, you've got Deshaun Jackson, and you've got Pierre Garçon for the Redskins. And then on the Giants team, I mean, people talk about the trio of receivers in Arizona, but when you've got OBJ, Victor Cruz, and Sterling Shepard, this Giant receiving core is going to start to turn a lot of heads as the season wears on. And, of course, one thing that I think a lot of people are looking forward to in this matchup is the contest between the sort of reprise of the contest between Josh Norman and Odell Beckham Jr. That game, their matchup last season had real consequences for me in the playoffs. I was missing Odell Beckham Jr. Because of his suspension after his spat with Josh Norman last year. Now they're divisional opponents. They're going to be seeing each other twice a season. Do you have any forecast on how this is going to shape up, Matthew?
I think it'll quiet down very, very quickly. What's going to happen is you got to remember when Norman was in Carolina, it was just the two of them. This is a historical matchup between divisional rivals, and there's a lot more than just the two of them in this game. So look for, actually, just got an update, by the way, you should be aware of. Matt Asiata will be starting and not McKinnon in the Minnesota game.
Okay. Great news for the viewers. All right, thank you for the listeners. Thank you, Matthew. Okay.
Do we want to just kind of, in summary, because we've got about 2 minutes left in here, kind of go over the later games that people should be aware of? Like
sure.
Like Willie Snead he's supposed to go on Monday night, but the question is, if your wide receivers are only starting in the 1 and the 4 o'clock games, and you don't know whether Snead's going to go, you can't afford to put up a 0 on Monday night hoping that he'll play. They expect him to go, but he is definitely a questionable call, more towards the questionable side than our probable side at this moment. Other games that you can think of where we have people that you know of that might be impacting people.
I can't help, Matthew. I'm sorry, I'm frozen here on this end, and I don't have any notes.
Okay, not a problem. What I was thinking is, what are the 4 o'clock games that we have left that people would be interested in? But we're coming up on our time here with regards to this week, the biggest thing about these games today is remember that the matchups all come down to the strength of schedule. Remember the number of reps that they get. and the opportunities that they're going to have the opportunity to do today against weak defenses or strong defenses.
Okay, nice parting words from our analyst Matthew Schiff. For Matthew, this is Mike Davis signing off for Questionable Calls. Thanks for listening, guys.